Have you ever felt exhausted? Not because of too much work, but because of certain people who make you feel like you're always wrong, even when you're not. Have you ever walked away from a conversation, feeling completely drained, even though there were no arguments, no raised voices? I believe all of us, at some point, have encountered a toxic person, a coworker, a family member, a close friend, or even someone we once deeply loved. They don't need to shout. All they need to do is make you question your own truth, until you slowly start doubting yourself. What's most dangerous is when you don't even realize it's happening. This 13-part series isn't here to teach you how to fight back. It's here to help you become clear, steady, and calm in the face of people who harm quietly, with smiles, silence, or twisted kindness. I'll walk you through stories, real, relatable, raw. Not just so you'll recognize the patterns, but so you can finally learn how to step out. Not to win a war, but to reclaim your peace. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you won't miss any valuable content from Silent Strength. And more importantly, stay until the end, because this series won't just help you deal with toxicity. It will help you grow stronger through it. Part 1: The people who drain you are often the quietest ones. I still remember a rainy afternoon a few years ago. The air was calm, not too cold, but I felt cold inside. Not because anything terrible had happened. No one yelled, no one insulted me. The meeting I just walked out of went smoothly. Everyone was polite, everything seemed under control. And yet, the moment I left the room, a strange weight settled on my chest. I couldn't explain it. There had been no argument, no clear stress. But I felt like I had just fought an invisible battle. I didn't go home that day. I drove to the coast and sat for hours by the sea, staring at the waves. I remember asking myself, why do I feel like this? What just happened to me? It would take me months to understand. And when I finally did, everything made sense. I wasn't hurt by what someone said. I was drained by what someone didn't say. The small glances, the subtle questions, the quiet suggestions that planted seeds of doubt. That day, I met what I now call a silent thief, someone who doesn't need to shout or confront you to make you feel small. Someone whose presence slowly strips away your energy, your clarity, your confidence. And you won't even realize it's happening until it's already done. The truth is, toxic people don't always look toxic. Sometimes, they're helpful, kind, soft-spoken. They're the ones who always have advice, always mean well, always know what's best for you. I had a colleague like that. He never raised his voice. He never disagreed openly. But every time I came up with an idea, he'd tilt his head and say, "That's interesting, but maybe too different from what the team expects." Or, "Are you sure this won't cause problems?" Slowly, I stopped speaking up. I stopped suggesting things. I started checking myself, measuring every move based on how he might react. And one day, I realized, I wasn't thinking for myself anymore. I had let him into my inner space, and I had handed over control. The Stoics spoke of the inner citadel, a place within us that no one can enter unless we let them. It is our center of peace, our calm in the chaos. And yet, we often leave the gates wide open. Not for enemies, but for people we trust. People who seem safe. But not everyone who walks beside us walks with good intentions. And not everyone who smiles at us wants to see us grow. Sometimes, toxicity is not loud, it's quiet. It's the person who's always concerned, who's always just being honest. It's the friend who comforts you when you fail, but vanishes when you succeed. It's the voice that says, "I'm just looking out for you," while silently making you question your own instincts. These people don't break you. They chip away at you, gently, daily, invisibly. Until one day, you stop recognizing who you were before they entered your life. The danger is not in what they do, but in how you respond. Because over time, you start to believe them. You start to doubt yourself. You start to play small. You start to shrink your dreams to make others feel more comfortable. And without realizing it, you begin to abandon yourself, piece by piece, thought by thought, dream by dream. I want you to know something now. You are not wrong to feel tired after talking to someone. You are not weak for needing space. You are not selfish for wanting to protect your peace. You are simply human. And you have a right to your energy. You have a right to your emotional space. You have a right to your inner citadel. The Stoics didn't teach us to fight toxic people. They taught us to recognize them, then quietly reclaim our power. Not with drama. Not with confrontation. But with quiet clarity. With firm silence. With distance. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to explain. You don't even need closure. You only need to listen to how you feel when they're around, and trust that feeling. Ask yourself, after spending time with them, do you feel lighter or heavier? Do you feel grounded or shaken? Do you feel more like yourself, or less? Your body always knows. Your nervous system doesn't lie. So protect your peace. Guard your space. Not everyone deserves access to your mind, your heart, or your energy. Let them think what they want. Let them say what they will. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to stay rooted in who you are. And if someone is costing you your clarity, your joy, your strength, they're too expensive to keep close. This is where your freedom begins. Not in fighting others, but in no longer fighting yourself. Not in proving anyone wrong, but in proving to yourself that your energy matters. And not in being liked, but in being whole. If you've ever walked away from someone and thought, I feel smaller, then maybe that's all the answer you need. Let that feeling be your teacher. Let your silence be your boundary. Let your self-respect be louder than your explanations. Because sometimes, peace isn't found in getting closer. It's found in stepping back. Part 2. Fortify your inner boundaries. I used to believe that openness was the best way to live. That if you were honest and genuine, people would meet you with the same sincerity. I shared a lot, with friends, with colleagues, even with people I barely knew, because I thought being open meant being strong. I thought vulnerability was always a bridge. But life doesn't work according to our sincerity. It works according to clarity and boundaries. And I didn't learn that truth in a single moment. I learned it through exhaustion. There was a time when I shared an idea with someone I trusted, an idea I had been quietly building for months. Their response wasn't cruel. They simply paused and said, I think you should be careful. Maybe you're taking on too much. Their words weren't loud. They didn't mock me. But something inside me deflated. That night, I closed my journal. I turned off the lights early. A dream had just been put to sleep, not by hatred, but by doubt, disguised as concern. I don't blame them. Truly. They weren't trying to hurt me. But I had given them access to a part of me I hadn't yet protected. That was my mistake. I had opened the doors of my mind too easily. I let people walk into spaces they hadn't earned, and I forgot something simple but sacred. Your inner world needs boundaries. Just like your home. You can't let everyone walk in just because they're nice. Not everyone gets to stay just because they've known you for a long time. And not everyone deserves your trust simply because they ask for it gently. This isn't cruelty. This is self-respect. We often hear the phrase, set healthy boundaries, but very few of us actually understand what that means. Boundaries aren't walls. They're not ultimatums. They're not loud. They're quiet agreements with yourself about what you will and will not allow, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. They show up not in what you say, but in what you do. In how quickly you reply to someone when you're tired. In whether or not you attend that event just because you feel guilty. In how much you share with someone who has previously used your vulnerability against you. They show up in small choices. Like saying, not right now. Like walking away without explanation. Like trusting your body when it says, this isn't safe. I once had a mentor who told me, maturity is not about knowing more. It's about knowing what's no longer worth your energy. That line stayed with me. After that, I started a small ritual. I wrote down the people, places, and situations that consistently left me feeling drained. Not to judge. Not to shame. Just to notice. I paid attention to my energy after each interaction. Did I feel lighter? Or heavier? More certain? Or more confused? And what I found changed everything. Because the truth is, you don't need to fight anyone. You just need to stop inviting people into spaces they keep damaging. At first, some people won't understand. They'll say you're distant, cold, or too private. Let them. That's not your job to fix. The people who truly care about you will never demand access to parts of you that you're not ready to open. They will knock. They will wait. They will ask. They will not force. Boundaries aren't separation. They're structure. They tell the world, this is where I end, and this is where I begin again. And when you start living with boundaries, something amazing happens. You don't lose people. You simply filter. The wrong ones fall away. The right ones remain. You don't need to justify your peace. You don't need to apologize for protecting your spirit. And you certainly don't need to exhaust yourself to be liked. You are not a door that must always stay open. You are a home. And a home that never locks its doors will never feel safe inside. Most of us were never taught this. We were taught to please, to say yes, to make others comfortable. But real kindness doesn't come from self-sacrifice. It comes from self-respect. Real love doesn't demand access. It respects boundaries. Real strength isn't in pushing through discomfort. It's in knowing when to step back. I realized something else. People who are truly grounded, those who seem calm, clear, powerful, they don't talk about boundaries. They live them. They don't argue. They don't explain. They simply stand in their space with quiet strength, and the world learns how to meet them there. Since I began honoring my boundaries, I've noticed something beautiful. I haven't lost anyone. I've just stopped chasing those who were never really with me. When your inner world becomes ordered, your outer world adjusts. You stop begging for understanding. You stop over-explaining your needs. You simply live with clarity, and people respond. Because boundaries don't just protect your peace. They teach others how to treat it. So today, if you feel exhausted by a relationship, a dynamic, a pattern, ask yourself, did I invite someone too deeply into a part of me I hadn't even explored myself? If yes, then you don't need to make a scene. You don't need to shut the door loudly. You just need to slowly close it, and lock it behind you. What's on the other side of that closed door? Freedom. peace, and a version of you that has been waiting to feel safe again. Part 3. Be a gray rock when silence becomes the strongest defense. There was a time when I believed that when someone treated me unfairly, the right thing to do was to speak up, to explain myself, to defend my name. Especially when I wasn't wrong, I thought staying silent would make me look weak. But over time, I realized something strange. The more you try to prove yourself, the more power you give to the people who want to pull you in. I once worked in an environment where everything was quietly monitored. People didn't yell. They didn't confront. But they watched. They whispered. They noticed every detail, how long you took to reply, whether you were a minute late, even how you held your coffee cup in meetings. At first, I tried to please everyone. I smiled more. I explained myself constantly. I made sure to be seen in the right way. But the harder I tried, the more exhausted I became. I was being drained by a quiet kind of control. Not from one person, but from the feeling that I was always being watched and judged. Then one day, a senior colleague said to me quietly, "If you want to last here, learn how to be a gray rock." I paused. A gray rock. He smiled. Be uninteresting. Don't react. Don't shine. Don't feed their curiosity. Just quietly do your job and protect your peace. That was the first time I heard about the concept of gray rock, a method used to handle toxic people by becoming emotionally unreactive. Not cold. Not fake. Just neutral. Boring. Unavailable for drama. You don't disappear. You don't fight. You simply give them nothing to grab onto. We're taught that silence means weakness. But that's not true. Silence, when chosen intentionally, is one of the strongest forms of self-protection. Toxic people don't want to fight you. They want you to fight yourself. They want your reactions, your defensiveness, your explanations, your need to be understood. Because every time you respond, they learn something. Every time you justify, they twist it. And eventually, you become the overreacting one. But when you go gray, when you stop engaging emotionally, they lose their grip. You're no longer fun to manipulate. You're no longer a source of fuel. They move on. Because they're not after connection. They're after control. I once applied this method with someone who constantly texted me, not to connect, but to complain, to gossip, to bait me into agreeing with their bitterness. If I didn't respond, they'd say, "Why are you ignoring me?" If I did respond, they'd say, "See, even you agree." So I stopped playing. I gave short replies. No energy. No stories. no opinions. And soon, they faded away. Not because I blocked them, but because I stopped being useful to their emotional games. Many people struggle with this. Not because they don't see the manipulation, but because they're afraid of being called cold, distant, or unfriendly. But here's the real question. Do you want to be liked, or do you want to be at peace? You don't owe anyone your constant availability. You don't have to sparkle for people to treat you with respect. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No reply. No defense. No performance. Not because you're scared, but because you've chosen yourself. Not every statement needs a response. Not every message deserves your energy. Not every invitation is worth accepting. Some words are traps. Some questions are just bait. Some conversations are disguised attempts to pull you into confusion. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, ask yourself, am I reacting out of truth, or just protecting my ego? If nothing meaningful is at stake, let it go. Let it fall. Let them talk to the wind. Because sometimes, the best way to win is not to play at all. Think of the most seasoned warriors. They don't draw their sword for every sound. They conserve their energy. They move only when it matters. You can do the same. Learn to hide in the light. Be calm. Be still. Let people underestimate you. Let them misunderstand. It's not your job to correct every opinion. It's your job to protect your energy. And when you do that, when you stop explaining, stop reacting, stop dancing to someone else's chaos, you reclaim your power. If you've ever left a conversation feeling drained, if you've ever read a message that made you feel manipulated or cornered, try being a gray rock for a few days. Not to disappear. Not to punish. But simply, to reset. You'll be surprised how quiet life becomes when you no longer give your energy to the noise. And maybe, just maybe, peace isn't something you need to search for. It returns the moment you stop letting people pull you away from it. Part 4. Be the broken record, when calm repetition becomes your shield. There's a certain kind of person we all eventually meet. The one who simply won't stop until you react. They start off friendly, casual. But when you don't agree, when you don't do what they want, they begin to circle back. They ask the same question in different ways. They bring up past mistakes. They repeat a small criticism until it becomes a full-blown issue. They don't raise their voice. They don't insult you. They just don't let it go. I once worked with someone like that. We disagreed on something small, a creative direction in a project. I calmly explained my viewpoint. He didn't argue. But the next day, he brought it up again. And then the week after. Always beginning with a soft opener. I just still feel something's off here. At first, I kept re-explaining. Then I started second-guessing myself. Not because he was right, but because he kept repeating it so consistently that it made me feel unsure. That's when I discovered a strategy that changed everything. One I've used ever since in many areas of life. The broken record. It's simple. You state your point, clearly, kindly, and once. And if they circle back, you repeat the same line. Same tone. Same words. No added explanation. No frustration. Just calm, unwavering consistency. It may sound robotic, but it's one of the most effective tools against emotional manipulation. Because people who manipulate aren't looking for truth. They're looking for weakness. They push not to understand you, but to see if they can shake you. When you give them multiple answers, they look for cracks between your sentences. But when your message is steady, they find nothing to grip. They lose their favorite tool. Your emotional reaction. When I applied this with that colleague, his first reaction was silence. Not because he agreed, but because he had nothing left to pull from. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I simply said, I've explained my position clearly. And I believe this is the right direction for our team. Let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll reevaluate. When he brought it up again, I repeated it word for word. No more, no less. After 3 times, he stopped. We often think winning an argument means saying more, being sharper, more logical, more convincing. But in truth, strength often lies in saying one thing and standing still. Not proving you're right. Just not moving from your truth. In communication psychology, this is a real technique. It's used to protect people from guilt-based persuasion, to hold personal boundaries without conflict, to exit cycles of emotional pressure. And it works not because it's aggressive, but because it's grounded. It doesn't spark fights. It removes fuel. Manipulators rely on your guilt, your confusion, your fear of being seen as difficult. But you don't owe anyone an explanation beyond clarity. You don't need to adjust your truth just because someone refuses to accept it. You're not being difficult. You're being clear. Someone once told me, I'm not a stubborn person. But there are moments when being soft becomes a crack. And steady repetition is how I protect my values. You don't need to shout to stand firm. You don't need to win the conversation. You just need to stay rooted. And the more grounded you are, the less others try to push. Because when your message is consistent, people recognize your boundaries, whether they agree or not. So the next time someone brings up the same issue over and over, ask yourself, am I about to react, or am I going to repeat? And choose the latter. Kindly, calmly, as many times as necessary. Don't escalate. Don't explain again. Don't negotiate with pressure. You're not stonewalling. You're preserving your peace. You're showing them that their repetition won't move you. And in doing so, you remind them. Control only works when someone gives away their center. You won't. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can say is the same thing again and again and again. Part 5. When they try to make you feel guilty, stand with your inner truth. I once had a friend I trusted deeply. For many years, I believed he genuinely cared about me. He always checked in, always listened, always showed up when I was struggling. He was the kind of friend I turned to first, no matter what. But over time, I started noticing something odd. Whenever something good happened in my life, a promotion, a new project, a personal breakthrough, his reaction was never joy. He would go quiet, change the subject, or say something like, "That's good, but be careful. Rising too fast is dangerous." Yet when I was going through a rough patch, he suddenly lit up. He talked more, offered advice, spoke as if he knew what was best for me. And I slowly began to feel small. Like I had to dim my light so someone else could feel more comfortable. That was the moment I learned one of the most subtle forms of manipulation. When someone makes you feel guilty for living in your potential. In psychology, it's called guilt tripping, using subtle shame or emotional weight to control another person's choices. It doesn't look like control. It looks like concern. It sounds like, "You've changed. You're not who you used to be. You're successful now. Guess you don't need us anymore, huh?" And you start shrinking yourself to prove you're still the same. You make yourself smaller, more humble than necessary. You start holding back, just to make sure no one feels left behind. I know that road well. And it took me a long time to walk back out of it. Not by cutting people off, but by slowly, gently, standing with the truth inside me. I began asking myself, am I living honestly, or am I living to keep others comfortable? Am I being humble, or am I hiding who I've become so no one feels threatened? Am I sharing, or am I seeking permission to live my life? And when the answers pointed toward fear, not freedom, I knew something had to change. Sometimes, people don't hold you back with ropes. They hold you back with feelings. They don't say, "Don't grow." They say, "Don't forget where you came from." They don't block you. They just act disappointed when you rise. Not everyone who makes you feel guilty is malicious. Some are just uncomfortable watching you become what they never allowed themselves to be. I don't hold anger toward those people anymore. But I've learned not to give them authority over my journey. I've learned that you can love someone and still outgrow their expectations. You can honor the past, without shrinking to fit it. Growth isn't betrayal. Success isn't selfish. And living fully in your truth should never require anyone's permission. So if you find yourself playing small, stepping back, holding back your joy, downplaying your wins, just to keep someone else at ease, pause. Ask yourself, am I living from truth or from guilt? Because deep down, there's a quiet voice inside you. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't want to compete. It simply wants to breathe. It wants you to stop apologizing for your light. It wants you to stop making yourself less. Since I started listening to that voice, I've felt lighter. I've stopped begging for acceptance. I've stopped trying to keep people who only stayed when I was struggling. And I've realized, I don't need to be less for someone to feel more. If someone feels uncomfortable when you rise, maybe they were never walking with you, just watching. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need validation to step forward. You only need one thing: to stand with yourself. Even when it's quiet. Even when it's lonely. Even when the old voices try to pull you back with guilt. Because when you finally stop asking to be allowed, the world opens to meet the version of you that never stopped waiting. Part 6. When you stay calm, they lose control. Don't let them write your script. I once sat in a cafe one quiet afternoon and witnessed something I'll never forget. A couple was sitting at the table next to mine, speaking softly at first. Then, suddenly, the woman's voice began to rise, her tone sharper, emotions flooding the space. But the man stayed still. He didn't respond. Didn't flinch. He looked down at his coffee and remained silent. The more she raised her voice, the quieter he became. Eventually, she stopped. Tears welled up. And in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes, the calmest person in the room holds the most power. Toxic people don't just want to upset you. They want to see you react. They test your boundaries with sarcasm, with subtle digs, with offhand comments. They push your buttons, slowly, gently, until they find one that makes you lose yourself. And the moment you explode, they win. Even if you're right. If you lose your center, they've taken control. I once worked with someone like this. Clever. Polite. But sharp. He never said anything overtly offensive. But he constantly tested me. He'd question my decisions, not to learn, but to shake my confidence. He'd say things like, "Are you sure about that?" or "That seems risky." Always with a smile, always just offering perspective. At first, I tried to prove myself, to work harder, to earn his approval. Until one day, I paused. And I saw it for what it was. I was acting in a script someone else had written. A script where my role was to doubt myself, so he could feel in control. I stepped off the stage that day. From then on, I stopped playing his game. I did my work with integrity. I stayed kind. But I stopped reacting. No explanations. No defensive energy. Just calm, clear presence. And the moment I did that, something changed. He became unsettled. Because without my reaction, his game lost momentum. No drama. No emotional fuel. No control. You see, some people aren't looking for resolution. They're looking for dominance. And they get it not by yelling, but by directing your emotions. The moment you react, you hand them the pen. They write the scene. You act it out. But when you remain calm, you take the script back. It's not easy. Staying calm doesn't mean suppressing your truth. It means owning your presence. It means recognizing, this is not about me. This is about their need to control how I feel. And then choosing to respond. With silence, or simplicity, or stillness. Energy is contagious. Toxic people thrive in chaos. But if you become the anchor, their waves break before reaching you. This doesn't mean you shut down or harden your heart. It means you stop letting others decide who you are. Reactivity is instinct. Calm is choice. And the one who chooses calm always controls the moment. Next time someone says something that stings, before you respond, breathe. Step back in your mind. And ask yourself, what do they want me to feel? And what will I lose if I give them that reaction? You'll often find that the real victory isn't saying the perfect thing. It's saying nothing at all. Because the strongest person in any room is not the loudest, but the one who's no longer available for manipulation. Let them try. Let them prod. Let them wait. And let them learn. You no longer perform for scripts you didn't write. Part 7. When you stop reacting, others are forced to face themselves. I once had someone in my life who seemed to question everything I did differently from how he would have done it. Not in a loud or aggressive way. But every time I made a choice he didn't quite understand, he'd say things like, "You're not the same anymore. Feels like you're drifting. You've changed. I don't recognize you." The words were soft, but the weight was heavy. Each time, I walked away with a quiet pressure in my chest. Not because he insulted me, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doing something wrong. So I tried to explain. I shared more. I justified my direction. I tried to show him, over and over again, that I was still me. But the more I explained, the more I felt like I was losing myself in someone else's approval. One day, I simply stopped. I didn't defend. I didn't correct. I didn't explain. I just stayed silent. And something strange happened. He stopped too. No more judgment. No more passive-aggressive comments. Just quiet. And after a while, he messaged me. "You seem calmer lately. What changed?" I smiled. Because I finally understood. When you no longer react the way someone expects, they have no choice but to look at themselves. Most people who cause harm don't even realize they're doing it. They act from patterns, from old wounds, from the roles they've always played. And we, without realizing it, give them the space to keep doing it. By reacting, by pleasing, by explaining. But when we stop reacting, they lose the script. There's no one to perform for, no one to push, no one to prove wrong. You don't go quiet out of anger. You go quiet because you've stepped out of their game. Silence is not the end. Sometimes, it's the beginning. When you stop feeding the story, you become a mirror. A space where the other person has to meet themselves. Without your emotions to hide behind. You're not cold. You're not distant. You're just no longer participating in a role you didn't write. And that's when something deeper shifts. I once told someone close to me, "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stop being the reason others justify their chaos." And weeks later, she told me, "I've stayed quiet for 21 days. The person who used to manipulate me is now questioning their own behavior." That's not a win in the traditional sense. That's sovereignty. That's peace reclaimed. So if someone in your life is hurting you in subtle, confusing ways, with vague comments, quiet withdrawal, or emotional games, try this. Don't react. Not out of fear, but out of power. Do your work. Keep your heart clean. Let your silence speak. And if they truly care, they'll reflect. They'll adjust. They'll meet you where you stand. And if they don't, then at least you didn't lose yourself trying to be understood by someone who never truly listened. Because strength isn't in always having the last word. Sometimes, it's in no longer needing to respond. Part 8. Not all silence is kindness. Beware of manipulation by quiet. There's a kind of silence that brings peace. But there's also a kind of silence that quietly wears you down. I once worked with someone I thought was simply reserved, calm, observant, maybe just not very expressive. But over time, I realized something else. Every time I brought up a new idea, tried to suggest a change, or spoke with enthusiasm, he didn't argue. He didn't criticize. He just said nothing. He'd give a slight nod, look down at his notes, maybe say, "Interesting," and move on. And then, silence. Not just from him, but from the whole team. No feedback. No energy. Just cold air. At first, I thought he just didn't care. But eventually, I realized, this was his way of rejecting me. Without a word, he managed to isolate my ideas and turn the room cold. Without confrontation, he made me feel like I'd done something wrong. That's when I learned. Silence can be a weapon too, especially when used to create doubt. In psychology, this is often called emotional manipulation through silence. People who use this method don't yell. They don't attack directly. They don't do anything you can point to. But they create an atmosphere that makes you second-guess yourself. They pull back their energy so that you feel guilty for standing in your truth. They use stillness like a wall, and you find yourself shrinking. The worst part is, you start to believe it's you. You start apologizing for your confidence. You soften your voice. You edit your enthusiasm. You begin to seek permission, without realizing it. I remember one meeting clearly. I had shared an idea, passionately, with thought and care. He said only one sentence. Sounds alright. Then went silent. And the silence hung there, like fog. No one responded. No one built on it. And I left feeling like I'd made a mistake, though no one had told me so. Days later, he was warm again. Friendly. Never brought it up. And I began to realize, he hadn't disagreed. He had erased the conversation. It's hard to confront someone who never says anything wrong. It's harder still when they appear kind. But the result is the same. You start to question yourself. You start to adjust to their silence. And that's where you lose your voice. This kind of emotional environment is dangerous because it's invisible. You can't call it out. They haven't said anything hurtful. but their presence makes you feel smaller. They hold back approval just enough for you to keep seeking it. They don't have to disapprove out loud. They just withhold energy. And in that vacuum, you begin to abandon parts of yourself just to feel safe. Eventually, I heard a quote that helped me name what I was experiencing. Just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they're harmless. If their silence makes you doubt your worth, it's not kindness. It's control. Once I named it, everything changed. I stopped filling the silence. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped interpreting every pause as my failure. I began to sit with it. To let silence be just silence. And I started listening to my own voice again. You don't have to make others comfortable at the cost of your spirit. You don't have to interpret every withdrawn glance as a signal that you've done something wrong. True kindness never makes you question your value. And respect doesn't come with coldness. So if you find yourself constantly adjusting to someone's silence, if you find yourself anxious in the absence of their approval, ask yourself, am I afraid of their silence? Or afraid of losing myself in it? Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let the silence stay empty. Don't explain. Don't chase. Don't decode. Let the silence speak for them. And let your presence stand for you. Anyone who makes you feel guilty for growing, for speaking, for shining, is not someone you need to hold space for. You don't need to earn their warmth. You don't need to tiptoe around their silence. You need to trust that your light is not too much. And their quiet isn't your responsibility to fix. Part 9. When they talk behind your back, don't turn around, rise above. There was a time when I believed that if someone said something false about me, I had to correct it. That if someone spoke badly behind my back, I should confront them, clear the air, defend my name. But life taught me something else. Not every lie needs a response. Not every opinion deserves your energy. And not everyone who hears the truth will choose to believe it. I remember the day I heard that a former colleague had been saying things about me after I left the company. Half-truths. Twisted stories. Quiet jabs dressed up as just sharing. At first, I was angry. Then restless. I even drafted a long message to defend myself, point by point. But before sending it, I paused. And I realized I was about to stop walking forward, just to turn back and argue with someone who was no longer part of my journey. I asked myself, if I respond, who will truly understand me better? Those who trust me won't need the explanation. And those who believe gossip likely wanted to believe it all along. So instead of reacting, I chose something else. I rose above. Not out of arrogance, but because I understood this. Those who spend time dragging your name through the dirt behind your back do so because they know they can't stand next to you as you move forward. People who talk about you behind your back often don't do it out of truth. They do it from envy, insecurity, or just habit, pulling others down to feel taller. They're not seeking facts. They're seeking attention. And when you react, they get it. But when you stay silent, focused, steady, you take that power away. I'm not saying you should tolerate cruelty or accept lies. But I am saying this. Not everything that is wrong deserves your reaction. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. Because if someone truly wants to understand you, they'll come to you. And if they only want to believe gossip, they were never listening for the truth in the first place. One quote helped me find peace. Lions don't turn around when small dogs bark. At first glance, it sounds harsh. But in truth, it's about clarity. You are building something bigger than someone's whisper. You are walking towards something that matters. You don't need to stop for everyone who wants your attention for the wrong reasons. Your life isn't a stage where every critic gets a microphone. A wise friend once told me, "The way you live will silence everything false said about you. But not with words. With time." And I've found that to be true. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs consistency. Let your integrity speak louder than your defense. Let your results make the noise you no longer do. So if someone is talking behind your back today, ask yourself, do I need to turn back, or just keep walking? Is their voice louder than my purpose? Is my value really in their words, or in how I live? You don't need to answer them. Let your life answer for you. Because in time, the people who once whispered about you will either go quiet or try to reconnect, as if they never doubted you. And when that happens, you won't need to say a word. You'll be too far ahead for the noise to reach you. Your silence, when paired with right action, becomes the strongest statement you'll ever make. Part 10. Forgiveness isn't approval, it's freedom. For a long time, I believed forgiveness was something you gave to others. Something noble. Something kind. Something you do for the person who wronged you, because you're the bigger one. But the longer I lived, the more I understood. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. And your right to be free. There was someone who once hurt me, not with betrayal of money or love, but with the betrayal of trust. He was close. A collaborator. Someone I believed in. And quietly, without my knowing, he shared things behind my back, distorted stories, subtle poison that left me isolated in a space I once helped build. I didn't fight back. But inside, I was angry, quietly, deeply. I didn't confront him, but I rehearsed imaginary conversations in my mind. I played out scenes where I set the record straight, where I finally got to say what he needed to hear. And I thought, maybe one day, I'll forgive him, when I forget. When it no longer hurts. When justice is served. Then I'll let it go. But then one day, I came across a sentence that shook me. Forgiveness is when they no longer live in your head rent-free. I stopped in my tracks. Because suddenly, I realized he wasn't even around anymore. But I had kept him alive inside me. Not his presence, his damage. Not his words, but my replaying of them. And I understood. Forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's a decision. A boundary. A door you close so the past doesn't get to write the next chapter of your life. When you don't forgive, you don't hold power. You hold weight. You carry it like armor, thinking it protects you from being hurt again, when in truth, it keeps you from feeling free again. I'm not saying forgiveness is easy. I'm not even saying it happens overnight. I'm only saying, forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. It's accepting that it did, and choosing not to give it any more of your life than it already took. You don't need to make peace with the person. You don't need to reopen the door. You don't need to explain, reconnect, or reconcile if that doesn't feel right. All you need is this. Don't bring them with you every morning. I carried that heaviness for over 3 years. And then one night, journaling quietly, I wrote a sentence that didn't feel powerful, just honest. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be light. I didn't feel anything at first. But the next morning, I noticed, he wasn't in my thoughts. A week later, I came across an old message from him, and I didn't flinch. A month later, someone mentioned his name, and I felt nothing. Some wounds will never come with an apology. Some damage won't be repaired. And some people will walk away leaving nothing behind but a lesson. But that's the gift. You can keep the lesson, and leave the pain. Forgiveness is when you move forward, without dragging the past behind you. It's when you stop trying to be understood by someone who was never ready to see you. It's when you say, I choose peace over justice from someone who could never give it. I choose me. I choose to be free. So if someone still lives in your chest as a shadow, if your anger still visits you in silence, if your memories still hurt more than they heal, try this. Sit down. Write their name. And underneath it, write, I forgive you. Not because you were right, but because I no longer want you living inside me for free. Then fold that paper. and let it go. The person may never change, but you'll walk forward with a little less weight, a little more breath, and a lot more room for who you're becoming. Part 11. Toxic people don't change because you tolerate them. They change when you walk away. I used to tell myself, just give them more time. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe I need to be more understanding. So I stayed in relationships where, every time we spoke, I felt smaller. I believed that if I was patient enough, they would eventually change. That if I loved harder, they would finally see it. That tolerance was proof of strength. That suffering in silence was a form of loyalty. But one day, something inside me quietly broke. Not from a big argument, but from a deep, wordless fatigue. And I finally saw it. I had changed, but they hadn't. Because they didn't have to. I was still there, still taking it, still trying. We often believe people will change when they see us hurting. But the truth? Toxic people don't change because you're suffering. They change, if at all, when you're no longer there to manipulate. I once spent 5 years in a working relationship that drained me. Every conflict, I was the one to fix it. Every time they crossed a line, I justified it. I told myself, we're building something important. It's worth the discomfort. But what I didn't notice was that, piece by piece, I was disappearing. I got quieter, smaller. I was always the one to apologize. Always the one to soften. Always the one to make space. Until one day, I realized I no longer enjoyed what I used to love. And that was the clearest sign something had to change. Not them. Me. Toxic people don't feel urgency to change. When everything still works in their favor. As long as you're replying, cleaning up, staying quiet, holding peace. They won't feel the need to adjust. Because what you allow becomes what they expect. You don't teach people through your words. You teach them through your boundaries. And when you finally step away, no yelling, no blame, just quiet departure. That's when they start to notice the absence. Not the absence of your love, but the absence of your labor. The silence where there used to be your effort, your apology, your accommodation. Some will turn it back on you. You've changed. You used to be so nice. You've become cold. But the truth? You didn't change. You just stopped abandoning yourself to make someone else feel whole. I'm not saying every difficult relationship needs to end. I'm saying this. End the belief that your pain will wake someone up. End the idea that love equals endless endurance. Some people grow when loved. Others grow when they lose the right to keep hurting you. You can't convince someone to see your worth when they only value your silence. A friend once said something I'll never forget. Toxic people don't remember how many times you forgave them. They remember how long you let them get away with it. That one hit deep, because it reminded me, you can't control who someone is, but you can control whether you still stand there holding the weight. So if you find yourself always saying, just one more chance, maybe they'll get it this time, maybe it's my fault too, stop and ask, what am I really holding on to? Who am I trying to keep, and what am I losing inside myself to do it? Am I hoping they'll change, because I keep allowing what they refuse to fix? If your answers hurt, that's a signal, not to hold on tighter, but to begin letting go. You don't need to slam the door. You don't need to scream, I've had enough. You only need to stop replying, stop engaging, stop explaining. Walk away without the performance. Let your absence speak. Let your energy return. And maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. But you'll finally begin healing. Not because they changed, but because you did. You can't save someone from drowning if you keep holding your breath just to stay beside them. Part 12. You're not too sensitive. They're just too careless, and you've gotten used to enduring it. Why do you take things so seriously? You're overreacting again. I was just joking. You're too sensitive. If you've heard these phrases more times than you can count, you might have started doing what I did. Questioning your own emotions. I used to believe I was too much. I held on to words longer than others did. A glance, a small joke, a passive comment, it would stay with me for days. And every time I spoke up, I was told, you're being dramatic. You can't take a joke. You need to toughen up. So I began shrinking. I stopped voicing what hurt. I stopped giving feedback if it might make someone uncomfortable. I stopped being honest, because honesty was always labeled too emotional. I lived like that for years. Until one day, someone said to me, quietly, gently, there's nothing wrong with your emotions. You've just spent too long in places that never made room for them. And just like that, something opened. I realized I wasn't too sensitive. I had just gotten too used to surviving in careless environments. And I mistook that survival for strength. Toxicity doesn't always come in the form of cruelty or aggression. Sometimes, it comes in quiet dismissal. You say you're upset, and they say, it's not a big deal. You try to explain how you feel, and they say, you're overthinking again. You offer feedback, and they laugh it off, you're just being touchy. Little by little, this kind of response doesn't just silence your voice. It makes you doubt you were ever allowed to feel anything at all. You stop trusting your sadness, unless someone else agrees it's valid. You stop naming what's wrong, unless it makes others comfortable. You start believing that being kind means never being inconvenient, even when you're hurting. And that's how it happens. You start silencing yourself before anyone else needs to. I've been there. In relationships where even expressing the smallest discomfort made me feel guilty. Where I'd say, "That hurt," and they'd say, "It was just a joke." Where I ended up apologizing. Not because I was wrong, but because I was afraid they'd walk away. Just because I dared to be honest about my own feelings. Until one day, I sat down and wrote in my journal, "If I keep quiet just to keep people around, I'll lose myself. And then, what's left to keep?" That day marked a turning point. I started doing one thing. Treating my feelings with the same respect I gave to everyone else's. When I felt sad, I stopped needing a valid reason. When I felt uncomfortable, I let myself say so. Not to blame. Not to guilt. Just to stay real with myself. Not everyone understood. Some drifted away. Some said I'd become difficult. But what surprised me most was this. I felt lighter. More real. More myself. So if today you're being told that you're too sensitive, I want you to remember this. You're not too much. You're just not in a place that knows how to listen. But now, you can build that place inside you. Next time someone tells you, don't take it so personally. Ask yourself, is this about me, or their discomfort with honesty? Am I really overreacting, or just being human? Do I need to apologize, or do I need to stop apologizing for feeling? You don't have to be agreeable all the time. You don't have to let it slide every time. You only need one thing. To stand beside your real feelings. Even if others don't. Because when you do that, you're not just protecting yourself from toxic people. You're healing the part of you that once learned to stay silent in order to be loved. Part 13. You don't have to be stronger than toxic people. Just be clear enough not to follow them. I used to think that the only way to deal with toxic people was to outsmart them. To speak sharper. To respond quicker. To prove, again and again, I'm not someone you can push around. So I trained myself to clap back. To stay one step ahead. To win verbal battles. And after all that, I was exhausted. I didn't feel powerful. I just felt drained, still entangled in a game I never wanted to play. And slowly, I realized, The goal isn't to be stronger than a toxic person. It's to stop letting them pull you into their game in the first place. Toxic people are experts at making you lose your clarity. They don't use direct attacks. They use the gray area. Half jokes. Backhanded compliments. I'm just trying to help. And inside that fog, you start to react in all the wrong ways. You speak up, they say you're dramatic. You stay quiet, they say you're cold. You give feedback, they say you're negative. The more you try to be logical, the more they twist your emotions. I've been there. I had someone in my life who always quoted hurtful things in gentle tones. It's just because I care about you. You're not like you used to be. That's sad. Maybe try being nicer. Each word felt like a needle dipped in sweetness. Just enough to confuse me. I'd explain. Then react. Then feel ashamed for being too sensitive. Until one day, I stopped. And I asked myself, what do I lose every time I engage? The answer was clarity. My center. My peace. And so I chose a new path. Not to fight harder, but to become clearer. What is clarity? Knowing what hurts and not apologizing for feeling it. Seeing the pattern and not second-guessing your instincts. Understanding when you're being controlled, so you can walk away. Drawing a boundary, and holding it, even if you're standing alone. When I became clearer, something changed. The toxic person started fading away. Not because I intimidated them, but because I stopped playing their game. I no longer danced around their passive-aggressive comments. I simply asked, what do you mean by that? I no longer took the blame in silence. I said calmly, that doesn't work for me. No drama. No attack. Just clarity and consistency. Clarity pulls you out of reactivity. You stop following their emotional script. You stop chasing their validation. And when you don't follow, there's no game to play. There's a quote I love. Manipulators don't need you to agree. They just need you to keep responding. When you no longer respond, when you no longer explain, justify, or prove, they lose interest. Because the game requires your participation. So if you're tired of constantly dealing with someone, stop and ask, am I playing on their field? Am I reacting to their story? Do I want to win, or do I want peace? If you want peace, you don't need to get louder. You need to get clearer. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you will no longer allow. Clear about what you deserve. You don't need to overpower them. Just don't follow them. Because in the end, Clarity is the calmest kind of strength. And peace is what waits on the other side. Toxic people may appear anywhere. But your clarity, your calm, and your inner peace are what truly decide whether they still get to have power over you. I hope these 13 ways I've shared today are not just lessons, but mirrors for reflection and light to guide you forward. Clearer, steadier, lighter. If this video resonates with you, leave a comment. I choose clarity and peace. Let it be a quiet declaration to yourself and to others walking this journey beside you. And if you know someone who might be stuck in a toxic dynamic, share this video with them. You never know. You might be the reason they find the strength to walk away. See you in the next video on Silent Strength, where we don't just talk about surviving. We talk about living with depth, resilience, and peace in a complicated world.